Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Railroad to a Livable Planet. My name is Lorena Sosa, and I'm the Operations Director here at Zero Hour. And I'm so excited to have you guys join our training today as we talk about the importance of public transportation. So just a little bit of a roadmap for tonight. Today, we'll first be talking about what's wrong with our current public transportation system, how we can recreate this system, featuring Myles Boivin, who's our Deputy Director of Policy at Zero Hour. And of course, our next up, what sustainable transit exactly means for jobs, featuring Karo Achar from the Labor Network for Sustainability. And finally, be all and tying it all up with some music for change, featuring 2 Minutes to Midnight by Arielle Martinez Cohen, See the Change by Gabrielle Zwi, and After Extinction by Ayisha Siddiqa. So super excited and pumped to listen to all these pieces and get into these discussions as well. So, of course, I really want to start off by explaining that we're really gathered here today to uplift and center action for public transportation systems. For far too long, our transportation systems have really been centered around dirty fossil fuels that emit harmful greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. And I feel that as an organizer, even driver and student, I feel very confident to say that it's really time for us to electrify our transit systems and have cleaner air and make sure that we actually prevent that 1.5 degrees Celsius increase that we are placing our global temperature at really great risk of. Today, I'm surrounded by incredible advocates like Senate Majority Lead Chuck Schumer and our leaders at Zero Hour as well, as we come together and call for changes in our transportation systems. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, I want to also reiterate that we all deserve affordable, emission-free, and nationwide public transportation. The future really is possible, and it truly does depend on all of us. So of course, I want to start off by first thanking each and every one of our partners who helped bring together this event. So thank you to the DNC Council on Environment and in Climate Crisis, of course, Divest Harvard, Labor Network for Sustainability, the Sierra Club, and of course, the Progressive Democrats of America. I'm so excited to have you all today, and I cannot wait to see everything that we've all put together. One moment, sorry, there's technical difficulty with screen share. And now I'm so excited to share what exactly our Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has to say on public transportation.
Thank you to all the activists at Zero Hour for your incredible work to end the dominance of fossil fuels in our country. The clock is ticking for our country to take big, bold action on climate change, and we need all of you to lead the way. The future of our country is in the hands of all of you, the next generation of leaders, activists, and volunteers who are working so hard to move our country forward. And in Washington, we'll stand by your side. With Joe Biden in the White House and Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, where I'm proud to serve as the first New York Democratic majority leader, we are going to work every day to pass climate change that our country desperately needs. And it's why it's so important we work together to pass President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. It'll be the largest climate package in modern history. It will invest billions towards green infrastructure, green energy, and the countless creation of new green jobs. I'm especially proud that President Biden's plan has adopted a proposal I developed a few years ago, Clean Cars for America, an ambitious plan to phase out gas-powered vehicles and replace them with clean cars. Under my plan, the goal is all vehicles on the road should be clean by 2040, and Americans from all walks of life should be able to afford clean, zero-emission vehicles. I'm also proud to have recently announced my new plan called Clean Transit for America to replace diesel-spewing fleet buses with zero-emission electric or hydrogen buses. Without transforming our bus fleet, we can't reduce carbon in our atmosphere. This proposal will make our cities, particularly our inner cities, healthier and more equipped for the jobs of the future. And finally, we'll also work together to end the awful regime of tax subsidies towards the fossil fuel industry, which is holding us back in so many awful ways. I'm so grateful that all of you have spoken out on this urgent issue. Together, I'm confident we can make great things happen in the months and years ahead. It's been a couple of very hard years for our country with Trump as president, but thanks to your resiliency and courage, we now have a chance to protect our environment, to lift up people from all walks of life, and rebuild a country that is truly worthy of its founding ideals. Together, we can get this done. Thank you and stay safe.
And of course, thank you so much to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for sending and sharing this message about why it's really the moment for us to take environmental action on forward. And now I'm so excited to introduce Myles Boivin.
Hi, everyone. This is Senator Chuck Schumer,
who will be helping carry out the training session of this event. So thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Myles Boivin. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy here at Zero Hour, and I'd like to thank you all so much for taking the opportunity to sit here and discuss the Green New Deal Act. So the first question that we must ask is what's happening with Biden's current infrastructure package. Currently, 2 infrastructure packages have been proposed by President Biden. One is a bipartisan package that does not include any climate provisions. However, the second bill of $3.5 trillion would help in various sectors, like creating a civilian climate corps, and also includes a clean energy standard with a 3% clean electricity by 2030. He plans to move the second bill throughout budget reconciliation, which would only require 50 votes in the Senate in order to pass. And then next slide. So the next question we must ask is how we pass the bill. We'd pass this bill through budget reconciliation. Reconciliation is a budget process that would allow the Build Green Act, alongside other bills, to be passed with a simple majority vote. Under normal circumstances, legislation would need 60 votes to pass in the Senate, which could prevent crucial legislation to fund the renewable energy transition from ever being passed into law. Therefore, we need to push Congress and the President to pass the strongest clean energy and climate policies that would put us on a path to limit warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Next slide. So if we look at the diagram that's been provided, we see that the total US greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector in 2019 was agriculture with 10%, transportation with 29%, electricity with 25%, industry with 23%, and commercial and residential with 13%. Therefore, we see transportation is responsible for most of the carbon dioxide emissions by sector in the United States. Therefore, electrified transportation can drastically reduce the nation's most emission-heavy sector. Next slide. The Build Green Act was originally introduced by Senate Leader Warren and House Representatives Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Andy Levin. Next slide. And so the next question we should ask is, why is this bill so important? This bill is important because we all deserve efficient and accessible nationwide public transportation. This bill would also create nearly 1 million living wage jobs. And we also must transition away from a fossil fuel economy to avert the worst impacts of climate change. It's vital to invest in a green future in which efficient and accessible public transportation is prioritized in US infrastructure, and frontline communities are provided with economic support. The creation of sustainable union jobs is key to facilitating a just transition. Next slide. So the Build Green Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which stands for better utilizing investments to leverage development and generating renewable energy to electrify the nation, would provide $500 billion in grant funding over 10 years to electrify public transit systems and for modernizing our nation's crumbling roads, bridges, and rails. It would also ensure that the workers who will revolutionize our transportation systems are paid a minimum of $15 an hour. Next slide. The Build Green Act climate justice impacts would reduce carbon emissions by 21.5 million metric tons annually. It would also prevent 4,200 deaths annually by reducing significant sources of ambient air pollution. In addition to this, we would dedicate over 40% of all funding to projects in frontline, vulnerable, and disadvantaged communities. We would also create up to 1 million new jobs with strong labor protections. Next slide. So the next question we ask is how you can help pass the Build Green Act. It's important that you call your senators and representatives and urge them to pass the act and support it. You can tweet at your members of Congress and President Biden to pass the Build Green Act and the Reconciliation Infrastructure Package. Also, you can follow at This Is Zero Hour on our social media platforms and stay tuned for local mobilization plans. Next slide. We all deserve a clean, livable planet. Therefore, we urge you to fight for a livable planet with us. It's time to pass the Build Green Act.
Thank you so much, Myles. And of course, it's super important for us to, really take in this need to take action right now and fight for that planet that we really all deserve to live happily on. So thank you so much. And now I'm so excited to introduce our speakers for today, Karo Achar from the Labor Network for Sustainability. Thank you so much, Karo.
Hi, all. Sorry, I have a really bad cold, so I sound a little bit like Bane from Batman, if that's still a relevant reference. But I'm really excited to be here and talk to y'all a little bit about transportation policy and my relationship with it and the work that I do at LNS. So I actually did student organizing all through the time that I was in college as a student labor organizer with USAS, and really worked pretty closely, more than any other group of workers, with local UAW Local 2300, which were the bus drivers all in the Ithaca area where I went to college. And that was where I really started to understand the power of unions, the power of workers who are working in transit as a way to unify the community, as a way to be a part of the community, and as a way to advocate for the kind of labor standards that we all deserve. And so from there, I worked as a union organizer with National Nurses United, and again started to understand not just the impact of workers who are affected by transit funding and transportation policy as the operators of transportation, but also as the users of transit, right? So in Baltimore, where I currently work, 40% of transit riders are people who work in the essential job sector. And the number one group of people are people who work in healthcare, right? And I think that that speaks in my own life and also to the way that we understand the world, of how interconnected all of this is, in terms of the nurses who are union, the bus drivers who are hopefully union, and then the folks who are pro-union, trying to make sure that they're getting the kind of transit that they deserve and that we all deserve. So at the Labor Network for Sustainability, I work in sort of two capacities: as the strategic researcher / Maryland organizer. I work both on federal transportation policy and then also in local Maryland transportation policy. I think what we're talking about today is very federal transportation policy. And of course, the Build Green Act is an incredible effort to try to invest what we need invested in our transportation system, and specifically in our transit system. What has sort of always existed as the dynamic on the federal stage is there's 20% allocated for transit and about 80% allocated for transportation, and typically highway expansion and roads, and really disproportionately money towards lobbies and fossil companies, and not the people who are even really making transportation better for us all. So what the Build Green Act does is invest much more substantially towards the folks who really need that kind of federal funding, which is the transit system. I was just in New York, which is where I think I picked up this cold, and I took the Amtrak up there from Baltimore, and then I took trains all around there. And the nicest thing about it, and the thing that hopefully acts like this are trying to fund, is that transit is the most convenient option in a city like that. And so it's an option that everyone utilizes, instead of only sort of frontline marginalized communities utilizing it because they don't have access to their own transportation systems and their own transportation vehicles. So that's super, super important on a federal level to fund those kinds of things, so we can have cities that aren't just New York and all of us can pick up colds on transit. In terms of Maryland work, which I think is really exciting and I want to talk about, even though obviously this is a rally for the Build Green Act, it's really important to understand the ways in which fighting for proper transit is not just a national thing, right? It's really, really localized. The people who govern where those federal dollars are going is not, Joe Biden. It's your local transit officials. It's your regional transportation authority. In a city like Baltimore, you have an issue where you're getting federal tax dollars funding for the little you're getting funding for transit, but Baltimore, because of super racist reasons, doesn't have its own regional transportation authority. So the state of Maryland governs the federal dollars that go towards any transit funding in Baltimore. And the issue with that is that you end up with a really inequitable system I don't know if folks have ever heard about the fact that Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland really famously, after 12 years of advocacy, like 6 months before it was supposed to like break ground, canceled the Red Line, which was a train that was supposed to really, really serve the residents, the communities of color, the frontline and disadvantaged communities in Baltimore, and canceled that transit system and that train because he didn't see the worth and value in it. So when we talk about advocating for stuff like the Build Green Act, we have to keep in mind that we also have to figure out how we're advocating for a transit future for workers and for riders in our own cities. In Maryland, what I'm really, really proud of doing is that we fought really hard to get the Transit Safety and Investment Act passed. It's not enough to just have funding for transit. You have to have reliable transit and affordable transit. And the idea of the Transit Safety and Investment Act was to make it so that the transit operations of the state of Maryland, and especially in the city of Baltimore, operated in a way that actually served the people who were driving those buses and operating those few trains, and serving the workers who were also using those transit options to get to work. And so we successfully passed that bill through the General Assembly, and then Governor Hogan vetoed it. But we got it passed with enough votes that it'll be eligible for a veto override when the session convenes again. Feel a little bit like I'm rambling. Would love to just take questions from folks and talk a little bit more about that experience. But I think what I really want to emphasize is that when we fight for stuff like the Build Green Act, when we fight for local laws like the Transit Safety and Investment Act, when we try to understand how local public-private partnerships like the Montgomery County deal with a venture capital firm to electrify their school bus fleet, when we understand and invest ourselves in both local politics and national politics, we get a really clear picture of how funding transit is really the best way to advocate for the unionized workers who build, for example, electric buses and vehicles, for the unionized workers who operate and maintain those vehicles, for the unionized workers who use those vehicles, and then for the unionized workers who exist in those communities and get to benefit from all of that, right? Transit is a real multiplier of jobs and economic justice and opportunity, especially when it's invested in really intentional ways, like the Build Green Act does by embracing Justice 40 and making sure 40% of investments are to frontline communities. So I think that's the bulk of what I would want to say, and I'm happy to talk more about it for anyone who's interested.
Thank you so much, Karo. Really loved it. And of course, I think more towards the end, we can get towards answering those questions if people have them as well. But thank you so much. And honestly, I really want to echo again what you said, taking in that importance of local action, making sure there's multiple aspects to securing sustainable public transportation is so important. And yeah, thank you so much. Really loved it all. And now I'm so excited to share some of our pieces that were submitted by artists as we really spotlight the need for sustainable transportation for our planet. And now I'm super honored to share See the Change by Gabrielle Zwi.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Zwi, and this is a song that I wrote called See the Change. Sometimes we stop and think, why are we doing
Loved that piece so much. And I truly believe, again, with what Gabrielle said, we really can be the change and we should be the change that we want to see in the world. So now I'm so excited to share 2 Minutes to Midnight by Arielle Martinez Cohen.
Hi everyone, my name is Arielle Martinez Cohen, and I just want to thank you all for coming to this 0 hour event. Public transportation is an amazing way to reduce carbon emissions and to conserve energy. So thank you for being here. This is my song, 2 Minutes to Midnight.
The clock tick, tick, ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, eyes are open wide. And the clock tick, 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 stomach is feeling sick under the covers you lock. Then the phone, it starts to ring. Someone screaming. It's 2 minutes to midnight. Only 2 minutes to midnight. The sweat drip, drip, drips down your face to your lips, sitting straight up in your bed. The trembling spreads down to your fingertips. Is it just all in your head? Then the sirens start to wail as the systems start to fail. It's 2 minutes to midnight. Only 2 minutes to midnight. As the temperatures flare, carbon filling the air, will we survive the rise and fall? Will our history repeat, or will we plant the seeds to rise above it all? Then the phone, it starts to ring. Are you listening? It's 2 minutes to midnight. Only 2 minutes to midnight.
Amazing. And that song always gets me with the keyboard right in the second verse. And it's a really beautiful and powerful song that really emphasizes why it's so important for us to take action for the planet. And finally, I'm so excited to introduce Ayisha Siddiqa's After Extinction piece, really lovely poem that she wrote in. Yeah, I'm super excited.
Hi, my name is Ayisha Siddiqa. Today I will be performing for you a poem that I wrote titled After Extinction. Vaporless and personal, ours is a vulnerable storyline. There is no setting because the vegetation and river run and trees and buildings and the ordinary characters inside the itchy buildings have disappeared. There is no theme but waves of empty scapes, and the underside bellies are all extraordinarily ruptured, and our children never meet. No one sticks their dirty fingers into peanut butter jars or fights over the remote control. Monopoly boards never fly to meet the ground. No one spills coffee over their favorite pants. Deep appetites do not go unfulfilled, so no one becomes victim to the condition of truth, and no one is lost enough to compose music or ask, "Oh Lord, how come I born here?" And God never gets to stand us up. The grass never stretches upwards with the lowland cocoons, and the ants do not go marching 2 by 2. No one is there to watch the sun seep nectar into the sapphire, no precious chirping and shivering of feathered bodies. Jeremiah never wails, Muhammad never sobs, Jesus never weeps. And no one really cares. This is recent, these underlying beliefs, the earth as dead matter, the soil as commodity, the land as property, and that the long time horizons can be altered. And I suppose that is why compromise feels like sin. This pale blue dot on this dark surface of skin, these various networks of heartbeats and their various problems gone, completely gone. No chance to show off their resilience. The peace deal never comes, and no one is there to lament us now that we are gone.
Truly a powerful piece by Ayisha Siddiqa. And I think it really makes us all think about, why it is we are so dedicated to this cause on acting on the climate and how personal it is to a lot of us. And finally, I do want to finish this training by reminding you all to call your senators and representatives to take action in supporting the reconciliation bill. We really have a huge chance right now by pushing them to make sure they pass it, because it really is one of our only hopes for the climate. Of course, second of all, we want you to tweet your members of Congress and President Biden to include the Bill Green Act in this reconciliation infrastructure package so that we can really make sure that we are pushing for the best solutions for our planet. And finally, make sure that you follow us on all of our socials at This Is Zero Hour, and stay tuned for our local mobilization plans. This really is just the beginning of what we have planned for our planet. And I thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you to all of our performers and speakers for bringing your words of hope into this conversation. Thank you all so, so much. And if anyone has any questions for Karo right now, would also be a really great time to ask. Well, I definitely do have a question for Karo myself. So Karo, I would love to hear your experiences that got you involved in this movement. And if you also had any, words of wisdom for people that want to also get involved but aren't really sure how.
Yeah. Kind of, it's a complicated history, but like not. I grew up in Houston. Well, I was born in India and I grew up in Houston and went to college and saw labor, really learned about labor as like the great unifier of the things that everyone struggles through, right? We all work, and if you can make work better, you can make everyone's lives better. And so as a woman, as a queer person, as a person of color, as an immigrant, as an alphabet soup of oppression, I felt that labor was my way of connecting to everybody. And then through the social justice scene, I went to Cornell, I met folks who were involved in climate justice, who were involved in divestment campaigns on campus, and really started to grow my own personal sense of climate anxiety, and was like, well, what the hell is the point of fixing the workplace if the workplace is on fire? And so really reached a place of like, okay, this is where I want to be, and this is the work I want to do. And so went from organizing into this sort of policy advocacy with the Labor Network of for Sustainability, and take my experience in labor movement, my background in labor studies, and like apply it to the thing that I think is most urgent and can be really, really like powerful, right? I think so much of the narrative that exists for people is that labor and climate are at war with one another, because climate wants to take all of labor's jobs and labor wants to continue, burning coal. And to some level, that's true. Like, those situations do exist. LNS has a really incredible just transition listening project that we conducted all of last year. And talked to workers who have been impacted by that sort of transition out of coal-fired power plant jobs into kind of a free fall, and what good proper just transition can look like, right? So even in that far-fetched, like not far-fetched, the furthest spectrum of what can be antagonistic, there is a way out that can be collaborative and powerful. But there are also a lot of ways that labor and climate can work together. And that's why I feel so excited about transit and transportation work, because it's the low hanging fruit of climate work and labor work that can be really, really exciting, right? Like they're really good jobs. They can be really great for communities. To like fund transit is to not just fund the riders who are on it, but to fund the workers who are impacted by it. And it can be so great as long as we make it happen, which is why everyone should call their senators and representatives. And I already have, but I can do it again. In terms of getting involved with this stuff, I mean, I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. So if anyone is in Baltimore, Maryland and wants to connect, we have a transit coalition that exists, right? And I promise you that if one doesn't exist in your city, which I think would be pretty, you'd be hard pressed to not find one, that you can make it happen, right? Like there are Sierra Club chapters and League of Conservation voter chapters. And those are sort of the big ones that have chapters everywhere, but like local advocacy groups, I know that, so LNS has a transit equity group that we run, and every 2 weeks we meet with advocates all around the country. There's someone from Charleston, South Carolina. There's a whole group of people called MARTA Army from Atlanta, Georgia. There are folks who call in from the Bay Area, just like all these transit advocates who care not just as about transit as a climate issue, but who care about transit as an equity issue and transit as a labor issue. And they exist in your city if you live in a city, maybe in your small town also, right? Like if you don't know where to look, definitely I'll put my email in the chat, reach out to me, and you know, if I know anybody, I'll connect you. But so much of this is just getting like one foot in the door, and then you have a whole world of people available to you. The transit coalition that I'm working with in Baltimore, one of the people on our executive committee is just a transit rider. Her name's Anna. She's great. She cares a lot about this. So she decided to join the executive committee for the transit coalition and helped pass this, you know, Transit Safety and Investment Act. And so I think it starts there. It starts locally. I know that everyone says that. And I know that national politics are really sexy, but like you don't pass national politics without local action, right? Like advocate as a local group for the national policy. That would be my advice. And that's how I got into this stuff, is through local stuff.
I love that so much, what you said with like local action, because I think it is really like, I think a lot of people do start there and then as they work their way up. But I think, yeah, I mean, local action is really where communities held strongest. And yeah, thank you so much, Karo. Really love that. Would love if you could add your email in the chat as well for anyone who would love to connect. And again, we can also make sure that that is shared. So thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions for Karo? Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone who has attended. I'm super thankful for this discussion, and thank you, Karo, Myles, everyone else who joined this initiative. I'm super excited to see how we can move forward with this. Thank you so much.